The birthday cake hit the floor before I could stop myself. 30 candles scattered across the workshop like fallen stars, wax pooling into the grooves between floorboards I'd sanded myself. My phone buzzed again on the workbench, Dad's name flashing bright against the dim evening light. I watched it ring until the screen went dark. On the shelf behind me sat 30 unopened birthday cards, stacked neat as kindling, every single one returned to sender with those 2 words stamped in red, address unknown. My name is Taryn Wolf. I'm a woodworker in a lakeside town so small we don't have stoplights. And for 20 years, I set an extra plate at my birthday table for a man who never once showed up to fill it. Tonight was different though. Tonight I'd found something that changed everything I thought I knew about absence and love. The music box sat on my workbench, half finished, its tiny gears exposed like the workings of a broken heart. I picked up my carving knife and got back to work. The workshop smelled like cedar and old varnish, the kind of smell that gets into your clothes and stays there. I'd inherited this place from Mom 7 years ago, along with the house, the debts, and a single photograph of Dad standing beside his rig. He looked young in that picture, maybe 25, with hands like mine and eyes that seemed to be looking at something far beyond the camera's reach. I kept that photo in my toolbox, wrapped in oilcloth so the sawdust wouldn't damage it. When I was 12, I believed Dad would come home. I carved tiny animals for the market kids and saved every coin in a tin can labeled, "For Dad's Return." The letters on that can had faded now, worn smooth by years of me running my thumb across them while I waited for headlights that never turned down our driveway. Mom used to make excuses. "He's working extra shifts," she'd say, forcing brightness into her voice that didn't reach her eyes. "Next year will be different." But next year was always the same. An empty chair at breakfast. A phone that never rang. Birthday candles I'd blow out alone while Mom hummed off-key and pretended not to notice the tears I was trying to hide. Dad drove long-haul routes across the country, hauling freight to cities I'd only seen on maps. 18-wheelers don't wait for birthdays, Mom explained. The road keeps moving whether you're ready or not. I accepted that explanation until I turned 17 and she handed me an envelope with shaking hands. "Don't hate your father," she'd whispered, her voice already thin from the illness eating through her lungs. "One day you'll understand." 3 weeks later, she was gone. I never opened that envelope. I was too angry. The years after Mom's death blurred together like smoke. I took over the workshop, learned to fix more than just wooden toys. Travelers would stop by with broken furniture, squeaky doors, children's wagons with missing wheels. I never turned anyone away. Something about fixing broken things felt right, like I was putting back together all the pieces that had scattered in my own life. I started a ritual on my 18th birthday, the first one after Mom passed. I baked a small cake, carved a wooden gift, and mailed it to the last P.O. box address I had for Dad's trucking route. The package came back 3 weeks later, unopened, with that same red stamp. I sent another one the next year. And the year after that. By the time I turned 30, I had a locked chest filled with returned gifts, each one a little prayer that never found its destination. Sarah ran the cafe next door, a cramped place with 6 tables and coffee that tasted like burnt optimism. She'd watched me carry out this ritual for years, shaking her head every time another package came back. "He doesn't deserve your kindness," she said one morning, sliding a free coffee across the counter. "Any man who abandons his kid doesn't deserve anything." I wrapped my hands around the warm cup and stared out at the lake, where morning mist was burning off the water. "Maybe kindness isn't about who deserves it," I replied. "Maybe it's about who we choose to be despite everything." Sarah didn't argue, but I could see the pity in her eyes. She thought I was holding on to something that was already dead. Maybe she was right. But I'd spent too many years learning how to carve beauty from rough wood to give up on the idea that broken things could still be made whole. A trucker stopped by the workshop one afternoon in late autumn. Big guy, weathered face, eyes that had seen too many miles of empty highway. His rig had broken down 2 miles out, and he needed a replacement part one didn't have. "I can carve you a temporary fix," I offered. "Get you to the next town at least." He watched me work for an hour, saying nothing, just smoking cigarettes and staring at the lake. When I finished, he tried to pay me triple what the work was worth. "Keep the change," he muttered, climbing back into his cab. "You remind me of someone." Something about his voice caught in my chest like a splinter. The way he said, "someone," made it sound like an apology. I watched his taillights disappear down the road and wondered if Dad had ever stopped at workshops like mine, looking for something he couldn't name. The letter appeared on a Tuesday. I was cleaning out the attic, boxing up Mom's old things for donation, when a picture frame slipped from my hands and cracked against the floor. Behind the photograph of Mom and me at the lake, tucked into the frame's backing, was an envelope. Yellowed with age. Unsealed. Addressed to Roldan Wolf in Mom's careful handwriting. The postmark read 30 years ago, dated 3 months before I was born. My hands shook as I pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. The ink had faded but the words were still clear: "He doesn't know you're paying for his schooling. Let him believe you're gone. He'll be proud someday. It's the only way we can afford it. I'll tell him you're working. He'll understand when he's older. Don't come back until the debt is paid. I love you. Always." The workshop tilted around me. Everything I'd believed about my father shattered in the space between one breath and the next. I sat on the attic floor until darkness filled the windows. Dad hadn't abandoned us. He'd been paying for something. For my education. The school fees Mom always said were covered by scholarships. The books that appeared on our doorstep each semester. The college fund that materialized when I turned 18, just enough to cover 2 years before I dropped out to take care of Mom. All of it had been him. Driving endless miles, sleeping in truck stops, missing birthdays and Christmases and every ordinary moment in between, so I could have a future he'd never had. The anger I'd carried for 20 years collapsed into something worse than rage. It became grief for all the years we'd lost because of a sacrifice I never asked for. Because of a secret Mom kept to protect his pride. I thought about all those returned gifts, all those unanswered letters, and realized he probably thought I hated him. That I'd grown up bitter and resentful, never knowing the truth. The music box took 3 months to build. I worked on it every night after closing the workshop, carving each panel by hand. The design came to me whole, a miniature truck cabin, perfect down to the dashboard gauges and tiny steering wheel. Each side panel was engraved with a date, 30 birthdays written in careful script. Inside the cabin, I installed a music box mechanism, one that played the melody Dad used to whistle when I was small. I'd forgotten about that tune until Mom's letter unlocked the memory. He'd whistle it while doing dishes, while reading the paper, while tucking me into bed on the rare nights he was home. Now I couldn't get it out of my head. The final piece was the secret drawer, hidden beneath the driver's seat. It took me 12 tries to get the mechanism right, a tiny button disguised as a gear shift that would release the compartment. Inside, I'd place something that would tell him everything I couldn't say in words. Sarah found me working late one evening, sawdust in my hair and exhaustion carved into my face. "You're killing yourself over this," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "What if he doesn't care? What if he sees it and throws it away like you don't matter?" I set down my carving knife and looked at the nearly finished music box. It was the best work I'd ever done, every joint seamless, every engraving precise. "Then at least I'll know," I replied. "I've spent 20 years wondering if I was worth coming home for. Now I know the answer wasn't about worth at all. It was about sacrifice. About a kind of love I was too young to understand." Sarah crossed her arms. "And what happens after? You send this to him and then what? You wait another 20 years. I smiled, though it hurt. "Then I stop waiting and start living." I sent the music box on a Thursday morning in mid-spring. Wrapped it in brown paper, addressed it to the trucking company where Dad worked, and included a note written on the back of an old receipt: you missed every birthday. But one gift is still waiting for you. I didn't sign my name. The return address was just the workshop's post office box. Walking back from the shipping office, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time, like I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Days passed. Then weeks. I went back to regular work, fixing what people brought me, carving small gifts for the market kids on Saturdays. Life continued in that quiet way it does when you're waiting for something that might never come. But I wasn't checking the mailbox 3 times a day anymore. I wasn't counting the hours until someone might call. The knock came 6 weeks later, just as I was closing up for the night. Not Dad, but a younger man in a company uniform, holding a clipboard and looking uncomfortable. "You Taryn Wolf?" he asked. "I work with Roldan at the depot. He got your package about 3 weeks ago." My heart kicked against my ribs. "Is he coming?" The man shifted his weight, not meeting my eyes. "That's the thing." He opened it, listened to the music, and then he just left. Didn't clock out, didn't take his truck, just walked out of the depot and nobody's seen him since. His supervisor's been trying to reach him. "Thought maybe you'd know where he went." The world narrowed to the sound of my own breathing. "He's missing." "Not officially. Left a note saying he needed time. But it's been 3 weeks and..." He trailed off, then handed me a folded paper. "Found this in his locker. Thought you should have it." The note was written on the back of a fuel receipt in shaky handwriting, following the trail. "Every town. Every gift. Need to see it all." Beneath that, a list of cities. Places I'd mailed those return packages over the years. He was retracing my failed attempts to reach him, driving to every post office where my gifts had been sent back. The deliverman cleared his throat. "There's something else." His route manager said he's been keeping files. Documents about every place your packages were sent from. Maps with locations marked. He's been tracking you for years, just never knew how to come home. I looked up at the darkening sky, trying to process this. "Why now?" "Maybe because you finally told him it was okay to come back." After the deliverman left, I spread out a map on my workbench and marked every city I'd sent a package to. 15 locations scattered across 3 states, each one a failed attempt at connection. Now they formed a trail, and somewhere out there, Dad was following it home. I loaded my truck before dawn. Threw in a sleeping bag, some tools, the photograph from my toolbox, and the only other thing that mattered, a small wooden carving I'd made when I was 8 years old. A tiny truck, crude and lopsided, with "Dad" carved into the side. I'd never sent that one because Mom said it was too precious to risk losing. I locked the workshop and left a note for Syrah, gone to find him. Back when it's finished. The first city was 200 miles south, a dusty truck stop town where I'd sent a package 5 years ago. The post office clerk remembered the return. "Mail for Roldan Wolf always comes back," she said. "No forwarding address." But a man came through 3 weeks ago, asking about packages sent to this location. Older fellow, looked like he'd been driving straight through for days. "Did he say where he was going next?" She pulled out a map from under the counter, marked with red ink. "Gave me this. Said if anyone came asking, to show them." Each town revealed pieces of a story I'd never known. In a small diner outside Lexington, the owner showed me a wall covered in photographs of truckers who'd stopped there over the years. Dad's face appeared in a dozen of them, always in the background, never smiling. "He used to come through twice a month," the owner said. "Always ordered the same thing, always left money for other people's meals. Never said much, but I could tell he was carrying something heavy." She pointed to one photo dated 15 years ago. In the corner, barely visible, was a wooden toy horse sitting on the counter. "He bought that from me. Said his son used to carve things like it. Kept it in his truck like a lucky charm." My throat tightened. I'd made dozens of those horses as a kid, sold them at the market for 50 cents each. He'd kept one all these years, a piece of me riding shotgun through 1,000 lonely miles. In a worn-out truck stop in Kansas, I found a cassette tape waiting at the front desk with my name on it. The clerk handed it over without comment, like people left mysterious cassette tapes for strangers all the time. I sat in my truck with the engine off and pushed the tape into the old player I'd installed last summer. Static hissed, then cleared. Dad's voice filled the cab, rough and uncertain. If you're hearing this, you followed the trail. Guess that makes us both stubborn fools. A pause. The sound of highway traffic in the background. I wasn't good at showing up, son. Wasn't good at much except driving and working and trying to pay down debts that kept growing faster than I could handle them. Your mother made me promise not to come back until I'd cleared everything. Until I could look you in the eye without shame. By the time that happened, I'd been gone so long I didn't know how to come home. His voice broke. So I just kept driving. Kept working. Watched you grow up through school records and report cards your mother sent. Watched you become exactly the kind of man I'd hoped you'd be. Better than me. Kinder. More static. Then, if you still want to see me, bring the truck. The wooden one. You'll know where. The tape ended with coordinates and nothing else. The coordinates led to an abandoned fueling station deep in the mountains, 3 hours off any main highway. The kind of place that used to serve loggers and hunters before the roads changed and the world moved on. I arrived just after sunset, the sky bruising purple and orange behind sharp peaks. Dad's truck sat in the center of the empty lot, driver's door hanging open, engine cold. A small birthday cake sat on the dashboard, 30 candles unlit, and a folded note tucked under the plate. You finally made it. My hands shook as I climbed into the cab. Everything was exactly as I remembered from childhood visits I'd almost forgotten. The smell of diesel and coffee. The street Christopher medal hanging from the mirror. The wool blanket folded on the passenger seat. And there, on the center console, was my crude wooden truck from 20 years ago, worn smooth from handling. I placed the music box next to it and wound the key. The melody filled the cab, that old whistling tune flowing out like water finding its level. The truck cabin on the music box was perfect in the dying light, each engraved birthday catching shadows. Then the secret mechanism clicked. The tiny gear shift button released, and the hidden drawer slid open beneath the driver's seat. Inside wasn't what I'd expected. No letter. No photograph. Just a key with an address tag and a map to somewhere 15 miles deeper into the mountains. The note on the back read, "The real gift is waiting." I sat there until full dark, turning that key over in my hands, trying to understand. Then I started my truck and followed the map up winding mountain roads, headlights cutting through thick pine forest, until I reached a gate I'd never seen before. The key fit perfectly. Beyond the gate, a gravel road led to a cabin with lights burning in every window. The cabin was small but solid, built from local timber with a wide porch that overlooked the valley. Smoke curled from the chimney. I parked and sat for a long moment, trying to steady my breathing. The door opened before I could knock. Dad stood there, older than the photograph, thinner, with gray threading through his hair and beard. But his eyes were the same, still looking at something beyond what I could see. "You found it," he said quietly. His voice was exactly as I remembered, exactly as it sounded on the tape. "What is this place?" I managed. He stepped back, gesturing me inside. The cabin was full of wood. Carvings everywhere, covering every surface. Animals, people, landscapes, all carved with patient skill. And then I recognized them. They were copies. Exact replicas of every gift I'd ever sent him. Every returned package had been opened, studied, and recreated. 20 years of my work mirrored back in his hands. "I never threw them away," Dad said, his voice rough. "The post office would send them back, but I'd drive to each depot, claim them as damaged goods, pay the fees. Took them home and opened every one. He moved through the cabin, touching the carvings gently. I couldn't come back. The shame was too heavy. But I couldn't let these go either. So I learned to carve. Taught myself from library books and watching videos. Spent every night off work trying to match what you'd made, trying to understand the hands that made them. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed completely. He picked up a carving from the mantel, one of the earliest ones I'd sent. A simple whale, no bigger than my palm. This one took me 4 months to copy. Couldn't get the tail right. But I kept trying because it felt like the only way I could still be your father. By learning your language. He set it down carefully. I was a coward, Taryn. Too ashamed to face you, too broken to fix what I'd destroyed. Your mother was right to keep me away. She kept the secret to protect you, I said finally, finding my voice. I found her letter. I know about the money, the sacrifices, everything you did. Dad's face crumpled. I thought you hated me. Thought you'd grown up believing I didn't care. I did believe that. For a long time. I stepped deeper into the cabin, surrounded by 2 decades of failed connection turned into something else. But I kept sending gifts anyway. Kept setting an extra plate. Kept hoping that absence didn't mean indifference. He nodded slowly. Your mother used to say that. She'd write me letters I was too afraid to answer, telling me about your life, about the man you were becoming. She said you had a kind heart despite everything. That you understood forgiveness even when you didn't know what you were forgiving. We stood there in that cabin full of carved memories, 2 stubborn men who'd spent 20 years trying to say, I love you, through wood and distance and silence. Dad had coffee brewing. We sat at a small table, the kind where knees bump and there's no room for secrets. I'm sick, he said after a long silence. Lung cancer. 6 months ago they said I had a year, maybe less. That's when I knew I couldn't die without seeing you, without trying to explain. The coffee in my cup went cold. The music box, he continued. When I opened it and heard that melody, something broke open inside me. That tune was the only thing I had from my own father before he passed. I used to whistle it to you when you were small, and then I drove away and left it behind. Hearing it again in that perfect little truck you'd made, with all those missed birthdays carved into the wood, it just... He stopped, overcome. It showed me I didn't have to keep running. That maybe coming home didn't require me to be someone I wasn't. Maybe I just needed to be honest. We talked through the night, filling in 20 years of gaps. He told me about highways that all looked the same, about diners where nobody knew his name, about the weight of trying to earn forgiveness before asking for it. I told him about the workshop, about Mom's last days, about all the times I'd waited by the window hoping his truck would pull up. I used to practice what I'd say when you came back, I admitted. Had whole speeches planned out. Now I can't remember any of them. Dad smiled, the first real smile I'd seen. That's probably for the best. Speeches don't fix things. Time does. And work. He gestured around the cabin. This was going to be for you. I've been building it for 5 years, little by little. Thought maybe if I made something permanent, something that couldn't be returned or refused, you might understand what I couldn't say. It's perfect, I said. And it was. Not because of the craftsmanship or the location, but because it was proof that he'd never stopped being my father. He'd just been doing it from a distance. Dad asked about the workshop. I told him about the repairs, the travelers, the market kids who came by for wooden toys. You're doing what I never could, he said quietly. Building something that matters. Making people's lives better in small ways. That's worth more than any road I ever drove. You paid for me to have choices, I replied. Everything I built came from what you gave me. We were both right and both wrong, but that didn't matter anymore. We'd found each other in the space between blame and forgiveness, in that place where love had always been waiting, patient and steady as the mountains around us. "When you're ready," Dad said as dawn started breaking outside, "I'd like to come back to town. See the workshop. Meet Sira if she'll let me through the door. Maybe learn some proper woodworking techniques instead of copying from books." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "And I'd like to celebrate a birthday," he added. "All 30 of them we missed. One cake, 30 candles. What do you say?" 3 months later, we stood in the workshop surrounded by people. Sira had organized everything despite her initial protests that Dad didn't deserve a party. But she'd seen how we were together now, how we moved around each other with the careful grace of people learning a new dance. The children from town sat on the floor with blocks of soft wood and dull knives, learning to carve under Dad's patient instruction. He was good with them, better than I expected. Maybe because he'd practiced for years on those replicas, preparing for a future he wasn't sure would come. The cake had 30 candles, all of them lit, and for the first time in my life, I didn't blow them out alone. Dad stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder, and we made the same wish without speaking it aloud. Sira had started crying, which made her angry, which made everyone else laugh. Outside the window, the lake caught the last of the evening light, and somewhere in the distance, a truck horn echoed through the valley. The music box sat on the mantel, doors open, melody silent now but still there whenever we needed reminding. Dad had carved one final piece to add to the collection, 2 figures standing side by side, looking not at each other but forward, towards something just beyond sight. He'd titled it, "Finally Home." And we were. Both of us. After all the missed birthdays, all the returned gifts, all the years of distance and silence, we'd found our way back to the same place. Not to the beginning, because you can't undo time. But to something new, built from all those broken pieces we'd both been carrying. Love doesn't keep perfect time, I learned. It doesn't arrive on schedule or follow the rules we set for it. But it keeps its promises eventually, even when those promises take 20 years to fulfill. That night, after everyone left and the workshop settled into its familiar quiet, Dad and I sat on the porch and watched stars appear over the lake. He didn't whistle the old melody, and I didn't say anything profound. We just sat there together, 2 stubborn men who'd finally stopped running, finally stopped waiting, finally learning that forgiveness doesn't require perfection. It just requires showing up. Even if you're 30 birthdays late.